Real estate words and terms with meanings and examples, part number 19. Percentage lease, which means a lease where the tenant pays a base rent plus a percentage of their business's sales. For example, a clothing store in a shopping mall pays $2,000 in base rent plus 5% of its monthly sales. Performance clause, which means a contract provision requiring one party to fulfill specific obligations. For instance, a construction contract includes a clause stating the builder must finish the project within 6 months. Personal property, which means movable items not permanently attached to real estate. For example, furniture, clothing, and vehicles are considered personal property because they can be moved. PITI, which means an acronym for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, components of a monthly mortgage payment. For instance, a homeowner's monthly payment is $1,500, which includes $800 for principal and interest, $500 for taxes, and $200 for insurance. Planned unit development, PUD, which means a type of community with mixed uses like homes, parks, and commercial areas. For example, a neighborhood includes single-family homes, townhouses, a grocery store, and shared green spaces. Plat, which means a detailed map of a subdivision showing property boundaries, streets, and easements. For instance, a developer files a plat map with the county before selling lots in a new housing development. Pocket listing, which means a property for sale that isn't advertised on the MLS and is marketed privately. For example, a luxury home is quietly offered to select buyers through an agent's personal network. Point of beginning, POB, which means the starting reference point in a land description for surveys. For instance, a survey begins at the oak tree on the northwest corner of the property, which serves as the point of beginning. Power of sale, which means a clause allowing a lender to sell a property without court approval if the borrower defaults. For example, after a borrower misses several mortgage payments, the lender uses the power of sale to start foreclosure. Pre-approval letter, which means a document from a lender stating how much a buyer is qualified to borrow. For instance, a buyer makes an offer on a house with a pre-approval letter showing they qualify for a $350,000 loan. Pre-construction, which means the planning phase before a building is constructed. For example, buyers reserve units in a condo project during the pre-construction phase before ground is broken. Prepaid expenses, which means costs paid in advance of the period they cover, often required at closing. For instance, a buyer pays homeowners insurance for the first year upfront at closing as a prepaid expense. Pre-qualification, which means an initial estimate of how much a buyer can borrow, based on self-reported finances. For example, a buyer learns through pre-qualification that they may afford a $250,000 home. Price per square foot, which means a property valuation measure dividing the total purchase price by the property's total square footage. For instance, a home is listed for $200,000 and has 2,000 square feet of living space, making the price $100 per square foot. Primary residence, which means the main home where a person lives most of the time. For example, a family spends 11 months a year in their suburban house, making it their primary residence. Principal, which means the original loan amount borrowed, or the portion of a payment that reduces the loan balance. For instance, out of a $1,200 mortgage payment, $700 goes toward paying down the loan's principal. Probate, which means the legal process of settling a deceased person's estate. For example, a home must go through probate before the heirs can legally sell it. Profit and loss statement, which means a financial document summarizing income and expenses. For instance, a landlord reviews a profit and loss statement to see if rental properties are generating a net profit. Promulgated form, which means a standard contract form required by a state real estate commission. For example, Texas agents must use promulgated forms for residential purchase contracts. Property management agreement, which means a contract between a property owner and a manager outlining duties and fees. For instance, a landlord hires a property manager through an agreement that specifies rent collection and maintenance responsibilities. Property tax, which means a tax based on the value of real estate paid to local government. For example, a homeowner pays $4,000 annually in property taxes assessed by the county. Public records, which means official documents available to the public, such as deeds and mortgages. For instance, a buyer checks public records to confirm the legal owner of a property before closing. Purchase and sale agreement, which means a contract between buyer and seller outlining the terms of a property transaction. For example, both parties sign a purchase and sale agreement stating the purchase price, closing date, and contingencies. Quiet enjoyment, which means a tenant's legal right to use a rental property without interference. For instance, a landlord cannot enter an apartment without notice, protecting the tenant's right to quiet enjoyment. Quit title action, which means a legal proceeding to resolve disputes over property ownership. For example, a homeowner files a quit title action to remove a claim from a neighbor who disputes the property boundary.